Move to the back of the bus and let the white people sit there. You stand over there. Do you want me to get a police officer and have you arrested? You might just have to do that. Fine, I'll do that because I'm annoying. Goodness, I didn't know that guy was so over the top. Well, that's history for you.
Hey, you dropped your glove.
Ow.
Fucking
I came back to this one last scene where I got to punch another racist. Okay, my job's done. See you at the next multi-doctor story. Hopefully. If not, I'll see you again some point. Ah, brilliant. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Series 11 Episode 3, Rosa, or rather the Revisitation review. Now at the end of the last review I did say this one was going to be more of a tougher watch and not so much fun watch, and would also be a tougher story to talk about and it wouldn't be a very fun review. But after rewatching it, it was actually a little bit more fun and it wasn't so tough to watch. I guess because it's the third viewing, it wasn't as difficult to watch this story because I'd already seen it before and I was able to see some of the more enjoyable parts of this story. And the reason it was previously a difficult watch and I thought it was going to be again is because this story is dealing with the civil rights movement and Rosa Parks. This episode would have dealt with racism, and not only in a time and place where racism was not just accepted, but enforced. And people were just racist because that was how it was, and heck, some people probably liked it. Yeah, Southern American states in the 1950s. It was a very different time, and it's these types of stories, the civil rights movement stories, all featuring this black people in this time period. They're always either difficult or they will have difficult parts of the TV shows and films. Will have either difficult episodes or films, or parts of them will be difficult to watch, and this is the exact same here. But like I said, this time round it was a bit easier to watch, and there was actually a bit more comedy in this episode than I thought there was. So let's get down to it. The plot of Rosa is that this time-travelling alien criminal from the future called Krasko has travelled back in time in order to disrupt history so that Rosa Parks doesn't not give up her seat for a white passenger, and thus not sparking the civil rights movement. And she would not change history. She would not make things better for black people. History would kind of be just, things would just kind of stay how they were before she had her famous refusal to refuse her giving up her seat to a white person. So the Doctor and company, when they accidentally arrive in Montgomery, Alabama, 1955, they discover Artron energy, which has come from Krasko's kit, and decide to investigate, eventually discovering that Krasko and his plan to disrupt time. So the Doctor and company reluctantly have to make sure Rosa is on the bus and that she doesn't give up her seat for a white passenger in order for history to be made, and to prevent Krasko from changing it. And that's basically the plot of the story. And Rosa, this is a fucking fantastic episode. This is fantastic. It's a brilliant story. The characters are all done really well, apart from the villain, but I'll get onto him later. And it's just really well written. This episode is written by Mallory Blackman and Chris Chibnall. Now, I'm not sure how much of an involvement Chibnall is in on this episode. Maybe more so the time travel stuff with Frasco, but or the main characters. But certainly, this episode certainly feels like Mallory Blackman not only knows what she's doing, but it's coming right from the heart. Being a black woman herself and being a well-known author, mostly in crime. But she definitely gets sci-fi historical down fantastically. She definitely gets perfectly. Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. This feels like a very real place that I'm watching on screen, and the characters are interacting with it. It's also great placing some of our characters in danger. Heck, all of our characters in danger to some degree, with Ryan being black and Yaz being mistaken for being a Mexican, although by the sounds of it, I think she's actually from Pakistan. Um, I think that's confirmed later in the series. So they're in danger, and the Doctor and Graham are in not as much danger, but they are in some danger just by association with being with Ryan and Diaz. So everyone has to be careful at this point. As we see earlier on, when Ryan does try to help out somebody, he does get slapped in the face. This is by a white man when Ryan's trying to return his wife's glove. And then later they visit this cafe and then go to this motel. Both of them don't accept black people. So the former they are forced to leave, and the latter, Ryan and Yaz, have to avoid being seen by this police officer who's basically following them so that he can have an excuse to arrest at least Ryan and Yaz, maybe also the Doctor and Graham as well. Later throughout the episode, the team do try and have to work out what Krasko's doing because they meet him just before going to the motel, and they try to make sure that Rosa stays on the bus in order for history to stay the same and so that things don't get out of hand. This is an ingenious story by Mallory Blackman and Chris Chibnall. The idea of this historical character doing something, but this other guy has turned up to try and prevent that or change that, meaning that the Doctor and companions have to make sure time stays on track, but it's going to be a pretty nasty thing to happen. I mean, Rose is not going to die or anything, and there's not going to be a terrorist attack or lots of people getting killed, but it's not going to be very nice. It's very hard to watch in places, but it has to happen. It's so time can stay on track. They rather not do it, but in order to prevent Krasko from changing time, they have to do it. And this adds an extra level of genius. They have to make sure time stays the same, but they also have to do it A, reluctantly, and B, they at the end they actually have to watch it. They have to experience it. This is nasty, and this is exactly what we needed in this episode. It's not the nicest episode, and it doesn't shy away from that. It packs that punch, and like I said, on earlier viewings, it will be more difficult to view. However, on later viewings, I did pick up more on the more fun aspects of the story, like with focusing on the main characters when they weren't getting into trouble with the locals. They actually had a few fun moments, like when they're planning to try and help Rosa out and what to do, and then when they're trying to set their plan in motion to avoid, prevent Krasko from succeeding and try to make sure Rosa is on the bus, etc. There's some really fun moments between the four main characters, and honestly, by this point, I think they actually have that four-person team dynamic in this episode. I'm not sure how much this is going to stick throughout the rest of the series, but this episode certainly there is a great team rapport between the four of them. The acting is actually really great between all four main characters. Jodie Whittaker, brilliant. Matt Gill, brilliant. Tosin Cole has found his feet with this episode. We'll see how he is in later episodes, but he's certainly found his feet as the character in this episode after a little bit of a struggle in the last two. And Bradley Walsh. Oh, Bradley Walsh. I could just hug the guy. He's fucking awesome. He's amazing, especially towards the end of the episode when it's him who gets up, which means it's him who doesn't have the seat, who Rosa has to give up her seat for, is instructed to, or to let, or at least a white person, and he's the one standing. He doesn't do this on purpose. He thinks that they've done their bit and they're going to go, but then the Doctor realizes, no, we don't have enough people, enough for it to happen, and then some more people get on, and then Graham is the guy who's standing, who therefore Rosa needs to move back, which then prompts her to stay exactly where she is, meaning that the TARDIS team succeed in keeping history on track. But that bit with Graham realizing it's because of him it happens, not just them trying to make sure this happens. Literally, he's the one standing up. It's heartbreaking. It's horrible, and Graham's face. Oh, I want to hug him. He's he's destroyed by it. And I don't blame him. I'd probably feel the same way if I was in that situation. It's horrible, and yet it's handled so well in the episode. And as mentioned, Bradley Walsh is just fantastic. But he's also got some really funny moments, like down at the creek. He's got some good. He and Ryan Tozenko have some good stuff down in the creek with James Blake, the driver, who I'm also going to talk about in a little bit. I think so. Bradley Walsh does some great stuff in this episode, both the dramatic stuff, like towards the end, and also the more fun stuff, like in the middle. It's kind of a great performance for him throughout. With Tozenko, I find that this is most. He's got quite a few significant scenes between him and Rosa Parks that work really nicely, and Tozenko does a really great job. And I can tell he's really enjoying playing this character who gets to meet some of his heroes or notable characters. And he also has a great confrontation with Krasko towards the end of the episode. If there was one character I didn't think got that much to do in this episode, it is Yaz. She's kind of just there. She does hang out with Rosa for a bit, but she doesn't really do an awful lot. But it's still great to have her around anyway, and for her to help her out. But I would have liked a bit more Yaz to do stuff in this episode. But Amanda Gill continues to do a great job, nevertheless. And Jodie Whittaker, once again, is brilliant as the 13th Doctor. And we start to see some of that unhappy side, at least. I mean, I wouldn't say dark side of the 13th Doctor, but she's not exactly enjoying what she's seeing, but she has to keep her clenches tight. Yeah, honestly, if Capaldi was here, he'd probably punch the racists left, right, and centre, but, well, at least he might have done. The 13th Doctor has to hold it all together, and I can definitely tell she is struggling. Even her as a Time Lord is struggling to not probably not try and change something, not to interfere with time, not to punch James Blake or to help Rosa out or something. Just has to sit there and let it happen. As soon as they know that Krasko's out of the way, they have to sit down and let it happen. And it's painful. And it works so well in the episode for all four characters. I especially love Rosa's smile as she's being taken out towards Ryan to say it's going to be okay, things are going to change, thanks for the help and inspiration. It's like she's saying thank you to him, and that she's doing it because of him, sort of way. So I do like that there is that connection between her and Ryan that carries on after their scenes that they had together. But my god, that scene is that's nasty. My only issue is that they do play kind of a pop song at the end, which worked for Vincent and the Doctor, but I don't think it quite worked here. I think Sekin Akino's score was powerful enough to drive it. But, I'm not going to complain too much. It's not really a big issue. So yeah, we got some great character moments for our main characters, and they are fantastic. Lynette Robinson is also fantastic as Rosa Parks. I don't see an actor playing Rosa Parks in this episode. I see Rosa Bloody Parks, or at least the young Rosa Parks, in this episode. It's such a great performance from Lynette Robinson, that she basically becomes not just a character, but she becomes the person. And it's difficult to distinguish the actor from the character, as she does such a great job in bringing this historical figure to life, and it's just brilliant. And there are some great character moments between her and Ryan, as I mentioned earlier, but there's also some great stuff with her elsewhere in the episode, and it's a fantastic performance. This is probably the best guest actor performance of the series, at least so far, behind Sharon Lee Clarke. But it's just absolutely amazing, and as mentioned, Lynette Robinson just merges with the character for this episode. Robinson? I'm probably botching the name a little bit. Also, the actor playing James Blake. Now, James Blake is a bastard, but the actor seems to be having so much fun going over the top and being such a horrible person. The character is an over-the-top character, at least by maybe 2018 standards, and that's not even including the historical context. But the actor does a brilliant job in being such a over-the-top type of character in the role, and so props to him for being such a great performer, or playing a role that wouldn't be very easy to play, or wouldn't be one many people would be up for playing. But the actor does a great job, and I don't mind him being over the top. If that works for the character, then yeah, and I think the actor does a great job doing that. What's also interesting to know is that the first scene, actually, not the pre-titles, what could have been the pre-titles if there was one, the first scene of this episode actually has Rosa meet James Blake in 1943, and there was an incident there, which sort of foreshadows what happens 12 years later. And that incident apparently was actually toned down as well for this episode. Apparently, it was actually raining in real life, so the episode actually toned it down. But yeah, that was a kind of a not so nice moment as well, and it nicely, well, I wouldn't say nicely, but it foreshadowed what would happen towards the end of the episode, as well as in the historical context, what would happen 12 years later. However, there is one character who isn't that great in this episode, and that's the villain, Krasko. Now, the actor, I think, is it Josh Bowman, he does a great job in the role, but Krasko is basically just a space racist who committed a lot of murders, like a couple thousand people dead for something he doesn't really explain, but it left a couple of thousand people dead. But yeah, he basically just travels back in time just to be he can't kill Rosa because he's not allowed to after being released. Because he went to Stormcage, which is a nice reference to the Moffat era, along with the Vortex Manipulator. So he goes to Stormcage for his crimes, but apparently Stormcage, if you can live a long life, you don't have to spend life in Stormcage for killing lots of thousands of people, I guess. So he gets released, but he can't kill anybody. That's a restriction he's been given on release, so he can't kill anyone. So that's why he plans to disrupt time. Good plan, but his motivation, there isn't any. He's just a space racist. There's no proper reason why he wants to go back in time to change time. He feels like black people have gotten out of their place, and he wants to go back in time to change that. Yeah, he's basically space racist, and that's the problem. We don't have a proper motivation. And on top of that, he's sent back in time. At least the gun thing that he has, that Ryan uses on him after the Doctor gets it, and then Ryan takes it. Ryan uses it to displace Krasko, and he goes back in time, I guess. I mean, some people think he's dead, but, well, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being killed when he did get back in time. Depends where he went. Or rather, when he went. But, yeah, he's just zapped back in time, and there's not really any consequences for him. Well, I suppose being trapped in a time period is sort of a consequence. Okay, you can have this one, Chibnall. You've got this one. It's basically an invasion of the dinosaur situation where the villains, or at least two of them in that story, ended up being trapped in the past. Okay, Chibnall, you can have this one. But, yeah, he's just not that interesting of a character. He's just a space racist. He doesn't have any motivation beyond that. His plan makes sense, and it's a good plan from that little motivation, but said motivation is just space racist. From the future. Gonna need a little bit more than that for the whole fact that you're going to do this in the first place, Krasko. Gonna need a little bit more than that. I have heard some people say that this story should have been a pure historical and Krasko wasn't needed, and they could have just had the characters see Rosa Parks getting arrested, and that would just be the episode. And no time travel stuff, and no sci-fi stuff besides the Doctor being an alien and the TARDIS and the time travel stuff, as we see in the pure historicals in the Hartnell and early Charlton years. But if that was the case, if Krasko was taken out of this story, there wouldn't really be a story. If it was just a pure historical, the Doctor and company just they wouldn't need to do anything. They turn up and they realise they're not back in Sheffield, and then they just go. Even if they just go exploring for a bit or something, they might not stick around long enough to find out if they don't need to. Or they might go somewhere else in America in this time period. Graham wanted to know if they could see Elvis, for instance. So, yeah, without Krasko, there isn't a plot to this episode. So you kind of do need Krasko or someone like him to try and distort time, try to change it in order for our main characters to actually try and make sure time stays on track. Otherwise, there isn't really any plot. They don't really need to be there. And even if they do stick around to see this historical event happening, it's still not an awful lot going on in the rest of the story unless we go beyond that and go into the start of the civil rights movement. But even then, they can still just jump to that. They don't have to stick around too much. So you do need Krasko or someone like him in this episode to actually have a plot so that the characters can actually have something to do in this episode. So, yeah, this episode doesn't have to be a pure historical. It actually works being a sci-fi historical because you do need someone like Krasko to try and do something like what he's doing in order for there to actually be a story. It's just a shame he has such a bad motivation. It's just he's a space racist and that's about it. But Krasko's the only weak element of this story. Going off story for a moment, we've got fantastic visuals. This episode is directed by the director of the Ghost Monument, Mark Tonderay, and he does a stunning job in making Cape Town look like Montgomery. Cape Town in South Africa, making it look like Montgomery and Alabama, USA. It looks absolutely brilliant. Not just that, it's 1955 Montgomery, and it looks stunningly brilliant and visually great. Some great visual effects in there, but it's mostly what just the cinematography itself and how it's shown on screen is it's just magnificent. These first 3 episodes are some of the most visually stunning episodes of the show, and it just looks so great. And the editing is also really great. That bit where Krasko shoots the gun and the visual effects serves as a transition from that to the Doctor and company running away from him. That works really well in this episode. Not so much in promotional and stuff, but it works really well as a transition from one shot to the next in the actual episode. Some great editing as well. Second Akinola's music is brilliant in this episode. Even more so than the last 2. I especially love the theme he gave Krasko. It's a pretty great theme, a little bit, what's this guy about? A little bit suspenseful in places, and it's probably the best villain theme that we'll get until maybe the Cybermen. Depends if Akinola gives the Daleks or the Master their own theme. But the Cybermen theme that comes up later on is really great, but that's the next series. So yeah, Krasko's theme in this episode is brilliant, and Akinola does such a great job with the music in this episode, especially with the I suppose Rosa's theme as well. So overall, Rosa is a fantastic episode and easily the best episode of the series so far. Will it stay that way? Well, at time of recording, it was my favourite episode of the 13th Doctor's era, and it's probably going to stay that way, but we'll see by the time we get to the end of Series 12. And also when Series 13 comes around. But in the meantime, yes it is. And yeah, there's a lot to like in this episode. There's a lot to like, and it's such a strong episode. It does the themes brilliantly. It does the emotions brilliantly. The characters are great, apart from Krasko, because he doesn't really have a very good motivation. But the actor does a great job, as do the other actors. They're really great. And it looks visually stunning, and it manages to capture 1955 Montgomery, Alabama perfectly, especially when using Cape Town as the location, and it's just magnificent. This is so good. This is such a great episode, and yeah, it definitely makes you feel those emotions. You feel you want to side with Rosa or Ryan and Yaz in this episode, especially on those earlier viewings where it is more difficult to watch, and it will get you more angry and cross with the us white people who are being racist in those episodes. And thankfully, we've evolved since then. But on data viewings, it can be a bit more fun and enjoyable when there is some more light-hearted moments in the episode. So that's great as well. So, I will be giving Rosa an easy 10 out of 10. Only 3 episodes into the Chris Chibnall era, and there isn't an episode I don't like out of the first 3, and the third one is a 10 out of 10. I must be a more positive person than some of the other fans in this fan base at this moment in time, but you know what? So what? It's my opinion. I love this episode. Yeah, it might be a bit tough to watch in places, but on this latest viewing, I really enjoyed other parts of it, and the episode as a whole is fantastic. So, yeah, fantastic episode. Best episode of the Whittaker era so far. It's just magnificent. And also, this is an episode I would recommend to people who haven't really checked out the Whittaker era. This is an episode to check out to show how good it actually can be when it puts all of its effort into it. I think everyone put 100% effort into this episode. apart from the characterization of Frasco. But apart from that, it's definitely a, well, let's say 95% effort then. 95% effort into this episode. But you know what? That's good enough for me. So I would definitely recommend this one to those who haven't really watched The Whittaker Era. After The Woman Who Fell to Earth, this would be my next best recommendation for that. And also maybe the Dalek stories as well, to show how good Chris Chibnall is with writing the Daleks, which we'll get onto later down the line. But yeah, this is definitely one I would totally recommend to those who haven't watched Series 11 or Series 12. This one would be recommended to see what it can be and how good it actually can be when it puts as much effort into it as it does here. So that's Rosa. Thank you so much for watching this review. Next time, we're going to have a bit more of a fun episode, a kind of a B-movie genre type episode with arachnids in the UK. Well, we've had 3 good episodes so far, but I think next time is where things start to kind of go down a little bit. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.